Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki, Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, we have once again a return guest, Ray Martin. And just as a reminder, let me tell you about him. So he is the daily explorer and entrepreneur, our award-winning business leader. As a coach, mentor, facilitator, speaker, writer, and mindfulness teacher, he is a torchbearer for greater human consciousness. And he's also a marathon runner and a fundraiser, and he's on a mission to empower people to live authentically and bring more joy and happiness into the world. On our last podcast, which was Leading Yourself, Leading Others, we touched on the 10 guiding principles that are so important to Ray. So we're going to talk about that today. And so, Ray, thank you so much for being a guest. We're still going to start with my two easy questions in case there's somebody that hasn't seen this previous podcast. So first is tell everybody, where do you live? Where do you call home?
I live in the UK, just on the edge of London, and I guess that's where I'm calling home now. I've been here since 2019.
In the brief bio, we talked about all these wonderful things you are doing, but just what led you to coming up with the 10 guiding principles? What were the pivots and the maybe obstacles that you had to overcome that really informed you and made you really passionate about this mission that you have now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll answer it briefly because I know in our last podcast we did together, I kind of explained the story in detail. But essentially, the circumstances of my life, changed in 2003-4 when I was just living in the UK and being a CEO, married, and all those sorts of things. And it resulted in me deciding to take what I would thought of as a 6-month sabbatical. And I really thought I was packing up my life to go and travel and explore and reflect on my life up to that point. I was 43 for 6 months. But one thing led to another, and a lot of random unforeseen events. I ended up living that journey out of a backpack and being a nomad for 14 years. Now, I had no idea at the time I was going to be doing it that long, but as that journey unfolded, I realized that when I left, I was logistically prepared for the journey. I had my stuff together, but I wasn't psychologically prepared for the amount of change and transition that I was going to have to lean into in completely changing my identity, in changing who I thought I was, in changing my daily routines. I didn't have any routine. I didn't have a fixed place to live or any of these things. So psychologically, I felt like I was in a sort of washing machine and a tumble dryer, just tumbling around, in the first few months of that journey. And so I then had the good fortune to be advised to do a Vipassana retreat, a 10-day guided meditation retreat. And that brought so much calm and clarity to me and so much mindfulness to me that I thought at the time I would really benefit from sitting down and working out some kind of psychological guidelines or safety rails I could apply to myself for the foreseeable future, so that I could lean on those rails whenever I felt a bit of a wobble or felt unsafe. And so I just sketched out really what occurred to me and my natural instinct and wisdom, 10 guiding principles for myself. And that's how it came about.
So quickly, just go through the 10 and then we'll do one by one. So
okay.
Everybody get your paper and pencil ready.
And so these were so, I mean, they sound, as I'm talking about them, they might sound like obvious these days because the world's moved on since
Yeah.
2006 when I did this Vipassana retreat. We're now nearly 20 years later, and the thinking I've seen has gone on leaps and bounds generally. But in that time, the first principle that I wanted to observe was the principle of presence. I left a life in which I was always targeted on the achievement of goals that took me into the future. So
Right.
I spent most of my time living in a version of my life in the future, always moving towards a future life that I was not quite yet in or couldn't quite be happy in. And if anything went wrong, which it did when I got divorced and my dad died, and that led to the journey, if I wasn't living in that future vision of the achievements I'd set, I was living in the sorrows of the past life that I'd messed up. And I just literally flip-flopped between those two lives almost all the time. And I never actually lived in the moments that I was in. And it suddenly dawned on me one day. So I set a guiding principle, right, from this point on, I'm going to do my utmost to be fully present to the moments I'm in and just be there and be present and not be concerned at all with where it goes to in the future or reflect on things I might regret about the past, but just stay in the present moment. And what that meant was I started to awaken to my sort of intuition a lot more about how to be guided and which directions to move in, because they weren't necessarily attached to any specific targets that I used to set as a businessman. So that's the first principle.
Very good one.
Second, I've called it the principle of self-acceptance. And that was because it was a phase of my life where I was being extremely critical towards myself, having been divorced and, arguably, not lived up to my own expectations as a husband and deemed myself to be a failure. I would talk to myself in a very critical way most of the time. In fact, I used to say at that time, if my self-critical voice had been an actual roommate who was sharing my flat with me, I would have kicked him out within like 48 hours. There's no way I would have tolerated someone speaking to me like that every day in the way that I spoke to myself. And so I made this commitment, knowing that, seeing that, observing that. I realized I was going to have to be self-accepting and realize I'm in a learning journey. Everything I've done to now has been the best I could muster with what I knew at the time. And I'm constantly learning and growing and finding out new things. And I'm in a journey of improvement, and there's no need to be hard on myself. And I had to remember this as a principle. And you might recall a time when you experienced a similar gap in yourself, in which you judge yourself to not be good enough. I mean, Brene Brown talks about this a lot. How does that make you feel when you're doing that? It's pretty poor. So this is why that principle came. I can't hear you, Vicki.
No worries.
Yeah.
How, as you're talking about the second principle, I thought, really the first principle, living in the present, also kind of informs that, because a lot of
Yeah, it
times when
does.
we have self-doubts and things, we're really remembering the past and regrets
Yeah,
and all those things, and
yeah.
worrying about the future. What am I going to do? What am I, but and so that really has that self-sabotaging, and we are the worst critic that there is.
Yeah, these guiding principles do overlap to some degree. It's very hard to separate them out totally
Yeah.
cleanly. And the third principle, the one of what I call non-attachment, I decided to try and embrace the principle of non-attachment because I didn't want to mind if I was feeling uncomfortable or I was having unpleasant feelings if I tried something I'd never done before. I was in what I sort of consider to be a very experimental phase of my life in this journey. And I thought I've got to treat it as such. I've got to be just observing and looking and gathering data about the experiences I'm having and not judging them as good or bad and not wishing it's going to go to a particular outcome that my happiness depends on it going a certain way. And so I really paid attention to just what was going on without any attachment to what I was thinking. And if other people did things that impacted me, I tried to be completely unattached to the feelings that would come up and the judgments
Which is
that would come up
hard.
as well, which is hard. And so that was a principle that occurred to me to be very, very useful. And that was one of the big things we were taught in the monastery when I did the Vipassana retreat, about this whole kind of nature we have that's conditioned by society to judge things as right, wrong, good, bad, approved of or not approved of, depending on the conventions of the era. And so I really
Yeah, and
wanted to, you know,
go ahead.
yeah, I just wanted to free myself from that kind of conditioned thinking if I could.
And what I was going to say is, I know so many people that they they keep feelings so long, and there's a saying, you forgive and forget, and they may say, oh, I forgave them, but they didn't forget, and they
Mm,
hold that and hold that, and it's like this festering,
yeah,
and that will come up at a later time
yeah,
when maybe the other person completely forgot that they ever did what they did,
yeah.
and realize that this person, sometimes a loved one, is still holding on to that frustration, that hate, that mistrust, whatever.
Mm, that's a really good example. I mean, another example for me, how it manifests would be I'd be on my own for long periods of time traveling, and I might meet someone and start a kind of mini relationship with them. And I had to be really careful to not attach myself to them because it felt really good and I felt really happy when I was with them. But if
Mm-hmm.
I started to think that my happiness was going to disappear the instant they left to go
Right.
somewhere else, I'd start to
Yeah.
cling. And I didn't want to start to cling because, I understood the nature of attachment and the clinging and the desires that it generates. The Buddhists call this the cycle of craving or suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how it manifests for me another way.
It's interesting you said that. That brought back a long time memory. When
Mm.
I was probably 9 or so, my cousin, who was in the Vietnam War, and
Oh,
during that
wow.
time, his wife got pregnant before he left, and then so she had the child while he wasn't around. And
Mm.
about 14, 15 months, I think that's what it was. And the boy got cancer.
Mm. Sorry.
And the mom, in her way to deal with it, knowing this child was going to die, totally detached herself from that
Mm.
child. And for me, it was so sad, because this baby was trying to cling to her, but she was always pushing him away. So while non-attachment is one thing, but I think we have to be careful to not allow ourselves, again, living in the presence, to love, to
Mm.
give, but know that it might not last forever. You
Yes.
know?
Yeah. Yes. Really well put. Yeah.
So what's the
Yeah.
third principle? Or fourth, fourth,
Yeah.
fourth.
Fourth, I called it wisdom, and why this came to be is that I was constantly asking other people what I should do when I had decisions to make. What do you think I should
Mm.
do? I was really unwilling for some reason to trust my own wisdom. I thought this is something I really want to work on.
Yeah.
I have intuitions, I have senses,
Mm-hmm.
and because I did this meditation retreat and started to practice mindfulness meditation every day, I started to notice that in the silence and in the quietness, I felt more confident about my intuitions than I'd ever done before because I'd never relied on it as a navigation system when I was back in my life in England. I'd just been following the steps of my goal plan to achieve everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I now had the space to start to listen to and rely on a lot more my own inner wisdom. And so, as one of the principles, I thought, wherever possible, I don't really want to take advice. I want to guide myself and get into the habit and practice of doing that and trusting that.
And I
And
think
that's
that's when you start to trust yourself, then whenever the noise around you, because there's always
yeah,
people that will try to tell you maybe something different that's not
yeah,
aligned with maybe their principles. And so that self-doubt comes back, and I think that really learning to trust yourself and believe in your smarter brain, which I believe is your gut anyway,
yeah.
is
I mean, I remember
important.
lots of little examples of it in the early days when I was really scared to trust it, but I did. Like, I remember I had to go to leave Thailand, go to Malaysia on what they call a border run to get a new stamp in my passport so I could extend my visa. And the wait times to do that officially were very, very long. And someone I met said, I know some guy who will do all that for you in like 4 hours. You go to this place and you give him your passport and X amount of money, and they just go away and they bring it back to you. And I thought, oh my God, I can't give someone my passport in a foreign country. But when I met the guy and heard the story and I met the person, I just knew it would be okay. I knew it would be okay. And I did. And I came back 4 hours later with my stamped passport and everything's fine. So things like that, I started to really push the boat out a bit on the rules I'd set for myself, which were so rigid that I couldn't move beyond them sometimes. Yeah, things like that.
All right. So what's the next one? Number 5.
Number 5, it might sound obvious when I tell you, it's called lightness. But, I've been through a period of several months of just being deeply grieving and heavy, burdened with pain and upset and loss. And so I made it a principle of mine to be bringing lightness and joy to every moment as best I could, and really mindfully bring that kind of light energy to myself, to others, and use that as a practice to transition into different states within myself. And so that was just something that was really important at the time. Probably not so much now, but at the time it was really important for me to do that. So I didn't want to take myself seriously, or have a big drama story about my life,
Yeah. I remember my mother-in-law when she got ill suddenly and was in the hospital, and then we transitioned her after 14 days to hospice in the hospital. And we knew from the hospice worker that time was going to be going pretty quickly. And so I had been on a project for her before she got ill, that I was to put all the pictures that she had gathered over the years into albums. And she and I were like chatting, finding who's this picture, what's that picture, and all this kind of stuff. And then she got ill and was in a coma. And so I decided just one night, okay, I'm taking those pictures to the room, and the 5 of us, my brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and my husband and I, are just going to go through these pictures together. And so as we were going through the pictures, we were laughing and we were carrying on and we were joking. And when a person's in a coma, they can hear.
Oh, great.
And the hospice worker told us just to talk to her, during the time we were with her. And I swear to God, she heard her sons, who she loved so dearly, laughing and carrying on. And she knew it was okay. And that night
brilliant.
she passed.
Oh,
and so that
what a lovely story.
That lightness truly is important, because grief can overcome you, but you have to understand that there are so many positive, wonderful things that person who spent time with you gave to you, that you should celebrate that. And that helps the lightness.
Beautiful. And also, I'm an aircraft pilot, and all pilots know that when you take off, you always take off into the wind, because it lifts you, so this is also a useful metaphor for me in this instance.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah.
All right, number 6.
Number 6, modesty and frugality. This is like very similar words, but I use them both. And the reason for this was I stopped being a CEO. I stopped receiving a regular salary. I just had my savings, and I didn't know how long the journey I was in was going to last. I literally had no idea. And so I wanted to eke out and, my financial resources as best as I could over the longest period of time and get the best value from my savings that I could use it for. And so I set myself, principle of modesty to make sure I didn't overspend unnecessarily, because when I was a businessman, I'd go to the finest places to eat and spend 4 or 5 times more than I would do now, on my life. But I had a very casual relationship with money, and I was living a very affluent lifestyle, almost a kind of laissez-faire attitude. One that I actually regret now when I look back at it, because I was very non-respecting of how valuable it was in a way. And so this was not going to work for me in this particular way of living. I really chose, budget hostels, places I could sleep that were clean and tidy and dry, not terrible, but not 5-star hotels. I ate in modest places that were within what I call a budget traveler's budget, etc., and just adopted that as a principle. And it really, really it's really changed my mind permanently. Actually, I feel like I sort of dried myself out from consumerism through the years of doing that practice. And I don't feel, whenever I'm feeling anxious or worried, I don't have that temptation to just go and spend excessively to get through it, So
right.
It's a good feeling. Yeah.
You've eliminated the FOMO, feeling of missing
Yeah,
out.
I really do. I sometimes go shopping with friends and I go, wow, I really don't have any urge to buy stuff I don't absolutely need. I must,
Yeah.
if something breaks or I need to replace it, of course I will. But I don't consume excessively at all these days. I really don't. It doesn't give me any pleasure or joy to do that either.
It's interesting, because I think a lot of times, again, maybe trying to keep up with the Joneses or whatnot, but if you think about it, if you have food, if you have drink, if you have family, if you have friends, if you have sunshine, or even the rain, all this, I mean, there's not a lot that you need, if a roof over your head and things like that. And, I guess you just have to have that gratitude every day. I
Yes.
start my day and end my day with that. And I think that helps you not to
Yeah.
worry about, do I have the newest car? I mean, my car has
Yeah.
250,000 miles on it, and I'm so proud that my car has lasted with
Yeah.
250,000 miles. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, I could get a car every 2 years or something, but why? My car gets me where I
Exactly.
need to go. So
Yeah.
modesty
Yeah.
and frugality. Awesome.
Yeah.
Number
Extraordinary.
7.
Number 7, minimalism, which is a sort of sister of modesty, I think, but
Yeah.
different, because my journey into minimalism started when I sort of collapsed the life I had in London. I had a huge house with a lot of stuff that I owned. And I decided to sell that house and either give away or sell everything that I had, because I'd spoken to quite a lot of families who traveled abroad as expats and stored their furniture for 3, 4, 5 years and ended up incurring huge costs. And when they returned home, they generally never wanted the stuff
They
back
did.
that they had.
No,
Right.
it's so true.
And so I did a lot of research around that. And I read the book on The Minimalist by Ryan Nicodemus and Joshua Fields Milburn, which has gone on to become a best-selling book. And what they did was they both, as an experiment, packed up the entire contents of their apartment into boxes in their hallways and then said, right, for a month, we're just going to go and take out the boxes, what we actually need to use, like their toothbrush or a saucepan. They said they got out of those boxes maybe 2 or 3% of everything they owned. Nothing else got used. And so I thought, yeah, that's a good principle for my life. But it's also, I've got a 22-kilo bag that I'm leaving the UK with. And if I'm on the road for any significant length of time, it's going to get full, and I'm just going to end up with 2 bags and all that stuff. And I thought, no, I'm not buying any souvenirs. I'm not collecting stuff I don't need or buying any fashionable clothes or anything like that. I'm just going to minimalize here and just keep with me that bare essentials of what I needed, which was, toiletries, minimal clothing, a laptop, etc. And I lived in the practice of that guidance and discipline for quite a few years. Yeah.
I find now when I travel, I don't buy a lot of souvenirs, but I do take a lot of
No.
pictures. I take
Yeah.
a lot of pictures because the pictures, as I said, they take you back there,
Yeah.
and so I think that not to hurt the travel agent, tourism industry, anything like that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
a t-shirt is not gonna. It's practical and, and useful after, and it still gives you reminders. But
It
yeah.
does. It does indeed.
All
Do you want to
right,
hear
number 8.
number 8? Connection.
Mm-hmm.
This was
Oh,
a
huge.
principle that was one of my values, very, very important to me. Even when I was living in England, I'm a kind of person who loves to connect with friends, family. I'm a connector at heart. And I thought, wow, I'm on my own in the wilderness, traveling as a global nomad. How do I connect? How do I stay connected with people that mean something to me? And the idea I came up with, which in 2006 was quite a new idea, was to start writing a blog, a travel blog. And I'd never blogged before. I didn't know how to do it. Technically, I was a bit of a Luddite at that stage. So I sat down for a couple of days and grappled with the tools of how to put a blog up on the internet and how to add the pictures and the words. And I started to write this blog, but the purpose behind it was for me to honor my need to stay connected and to bring that connection alive through what I was currently doing rather than what I'd done in the past. And that really was a joyful journey. The blog became a sort of a passion project, and it got very popular. At some stage, something like 10,000 people a month were looking at it. And lots of people, when I posted stories, would comment on the blog, friends back home, family back home. And that way I could stay in connection. And it just felt really good to be sharing the journey with all the people that I loved and cared about. So I wasn't feeling completely out of their lives or then out of mine. And so that was that principle really of how that worked.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
number 9.
9 is the guiding principle of contribution. One of the things that worried me about giving up my life in England and going on a journey of reinvention for myself, essentially, was it would be selfish. And I thought, I want to allocate, at least dedicate some part of my time and energy to something that contributes to the people I'm with in the local areas I was. And I didn't know what that would look like at first, but the more I traveled, the more I started to lean into the things that were really touching my heart. So some concrete examples I went to an elephant sanctuary in Chiang Dao in Thailand that I found very moving, what they were doing on a shoestring budget. I was in Nepal and I organized a picnic at an orphanage for 60 children. It cost $20, but it was life-changing for some of those kids. They loved it.
Wow.
I saw how much joy it brought. And so those events were starting to change my thing. I thought, how could I contribute to these things? How can I contribute? I'm just me. I've got my backpack. What could I do? I thought, well, and then I met someone who was a marathon runner. He was a traveler, and I met him. And I've been had a chat with him about that and really listening to his excitement about it. I said, do you think I could run a marathon? He looked at me, he said, have you run before? No, I haven't. He said, well, I'll show you how to run a marathon. It'll take 6 months to train, but I'll get you on the start line. And then maybe you could use that as a fundraiser for these things. And that's exactly what I did. I started a fundraising organization called Calling All Angels, which is still existing. I ran the New York Marathon in 2009. It raised $15,000. I then went on to run 4 more in that decade, raised about $50,000 through running marathons while I was traveling.
Oh, wow. So cool.
Yeah.
All right, number 10.
Number 10, gosh, the last but not the least, health is the principle.
Yeah.
This is, I think, coming up high on the agenda these days in most leadership development programs I work on, but it wasn't in 2006. What happened to me was I got involved in a climbing accident in Koh Tao, and I cut my arm really badly as I fell down the rocks. And within a couple of days, I think it had just got really badly infected and had swollen to twice the size. And I realized something really not right was happening. And I'm not a health conscious person, or at least I wasn't back then. I am now. And so I got myself to a clinic on the island, and they said, you need to stay in here. We need to get you full of antibiotics. We may need to do more drastic things, but we've got to address this immediately. You're in bad shape. And a couple of days later, the doctor said to me, it's good that you brought yourself in, because we might, if you'd come in a few days later, we might need to do an amputation. I thought, my God, it just suddenly hit me between the eyes that if I wasn't taking full ownership for my health and well-being in that sense, and I lost the use of my own physical body or parts of it, that would massively affect the quality of life that I was and what I could do or not do. And so I rapidly made that a much higher agenda in these principles for myself and thought, right, I need to proactively take care of my well-being. I need to have a check-in method with myself. How's my mental health? How's my physical health? How's my emotional health? And if it's not good, what is causing it? And what do I need to do about those things? What actions do I need to take? And I started to be much, much more proactive about looking after my I call it proactive well-being now, but my health really. And that was the principle where it came from. That's why it's there. So there's a kind of spread there. We've gone through them quite quickly.
Yeah, but it's such an important one. I know that whenever I turned my late 50s, I got really involved with that because I just saw so many of my loved ones that didn't.
Yeah.
They just felt they were bulletproof, I think, as they were young. And then in their older age,
Yeah.
their quality of life was just so poor. And, we want to live a long time, but not, if the
Yeah.
quality isn't there. So,
I think it's really changed a lot. My mum is 88 and she's from that generation where you never thought for a moment about your health until something went wrong and then you went to see the doctor and you did whatever they told you. So it wasn't that you were taking ownership for it. You were basically
mhm.
taking an instruction from someone
Yeah,
who didn't know your life or your body, but was just generally,
exactly.
there's a lot of things we could probably have
Mm,
a side conversation about that. But, so I didn't
mhm.
just, it's just, I think, it's really changed a lot since I was young. This is
Yeah.
really, we live in an era now where people have got all sorts of ways that they're very, very health
And
conscious, especially mentally.
yeah, and holistically, as you said,
Yeah,
the doctors
holistically.
were telling you, but it was usually a pill or a shot or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
And um there's just so many things that you can do that don't have to be that way. At first,
correct.
when my blood pressure was high whenever I was younger, at 40, I found herbs and things that
Yeah,
really kept it down until I, in my late 60s now, is finally had to get onto medicine. But really, if I get my weight down a little bit and keep exercising, I might get rid of
yeah,
that one pill that I take.
yeah,
But,
right.
you have to think about that. I'm going
Yeah.
to keep chasing around my grandboys.
Great. Perfect. Perfect.
Awesome. Well, guys, it's a really, I'm sure you've all enjoyed these 10 principles. And so we're going to have to wrap this up. I'm going to share, as always, a slide with contact information for Ray. He's going to talk to you about his book, Life Without a Tie. No, I said that wrong.
Yeah, that's right. No life without a tie. Yeah,
Life Without a Tie,
yeah,
and how you can get that. So please, if you haven't got a paper and pencil now, if you're just listening, you want to do so. If you're watching, you can get screenshots. You can go to my YouTube channel, Vicki Netling. Please subscribe if you haven't, and get all this information, as well as findyourleadershipconfidence.com website. So there's that book that you can get on the website, as well as Amazon. But he'll talk to you a little bit about that. The website is lifewithouttatie.com.
yeah.
Again, lifewithouttatie.com. And LinkedIn is his name, Coach Ray Martin. Again, Coach Ray Martin on LinkedIn. I'm going to have Ray talk to you about his call to action, what he has out there on that website, the resources, links that can help you, how to get his book, Life Without a Tie, and also what he puts out there on LinkedIn to help you in your everyday interaction.
Oh,
It's all yours.
thanks a lot, Vicky. The main the main reason the website is there for the book is that a lot of people who read the book asked to see pictures of a lot of these places I described, and so we mounted a whole load of pictures from different
Awesome.
stages of the journey, and that's one of probably the major reasons for going to the website. But also, I mean, I have to say this without a little bit of embarrassment, but some people wanted signed copies of the book. So if you want a signed copy of my book, you can order one through the website directly from me, and I'll send it to you from my home. But if not,
Awesome.
if you just don't mind an ordinary copy, then you can get it on Amazon and other places. But Amazon's probably the most of the sales come through Amazon. And my LinkedIn site, I'd say connect with me on LinkedIn because I'm regularly posting things I'm reading and researching and finding that are improving my own understanding of exceptional leadership. And that's my area of interest and how we can live interesting, extraordinary lives, all of us. And so I'm always posting stuff that relates to that. So you'll be able to pick up on whatever the themes are that I'm interested in at the time. So please connect.
Awesome. Well, Ray, so happy you came back to go through those 10 guiding principles. You and I could chat and chat and chat.
We
If you're
could.
ever in Atlanta area, you need to come and we can have dinner together so we can
Okay.
continue our stories.
Brilliant.
But as always, thank you so much for being an awesome guest.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
As I remind you and all the audience every day that life is a journey and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Netling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Netling. where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.